Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to continue my segments and looking back at some of the codexes within 8th edition. Today I'm going to look at Deathwatch. Interesting faction that came in late to 7th edition but added a whole bunch of variety to it. So how this works is I'm going to have a look at sort of their beginnings within 7th, their rules and sort of universal rules, Warlord Traits, Relics, Stratagems, etc. For the codex, and then I'm going to have a look at the roster that they have for them. What you need for Deathwatch is of course the codex. You're going to need also, if you're in Forge World, the Imperial Army, though I believe that's getting replaced very soon, probably somewhere 9th, next few months I imagine. And then also White Dwarf, because they didn't get Psychic Awakening, which had a series of problems with that. Now I'd speak on this one quickly, is that I think that's alright for what they did in the White Dwarf. A few people were annoyed that Harlequins and Deathwatch only got mentioned in a White Dwarf. But I just believe that, you know, Deathwatch and Harlequins, because they've got limited ranges to them in terms of model count, that there may be future plans in them to maybe move them up a wee bit more and give them a bit more. So I'm quite hopeful on that side, but we'll see in the future. The White Dwarf is not bad, but it certainly feels a little bit left out when you compare it to the other Psychic Awakenings. So Deathwatch was a new addition to the Imperial roster in the sense of getting a codex and models roughly about August 2016, just less than a year before 8th edition came out. However, the reception to Deathwatch was very, very positive. Being in lore for so long and finally to get tabletop representation was greatly appreciated by the community. While we had Grey Knights hunting down traitors and renegade psychers for years, it'd been refreshing to get the Xenos races, Xenos hunters instead. With a few simple units to the range, we saw a much more modernised Marine. The veteran models look absolutely fantastic. And really interesting in their Watchmaster, Veterans of Deathwatch and the Corvus Blackstar. However, less than a year, we then got the addition of Primaris, and Deathwatch became a faction similar to Grey Knights. Although Deathwatch did get Primaris, which Grey Knights did not, a lot of their unique units and abilities almost seemed outdated already. However, in a view, almost all Specialist Space Marine forces, they are partly suffered under Primaris Marines, but they will. I'll come into that into a longer discussion when I look at 8th as a whole. But basically, when it comes to Specialist Marines, we're talking, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Grey Knights, Deathwatch, etc. These Specialist forces with their own unique units sort of suffered a wee bit when Primaris came in, making them a lot more generic. Universal rules for Deathwatch. Deathwatch are an interesting one, Space Marines. They actually have a variety of special rules to them, and they added more in White Dwarf, confirming they obviously got Angels of Death, that including And They Shall Know No Fear, Bolt of Discipline, Shock Assault, Combat Doctrines. Great. Which is overall very solid. I spoke about it in Space Marine Retrospective, and overall I'm a big fan of these because there's a big improvement from And They Shall Know No Fear. Now, this is very interesting rule, when it comes to the special issue ammunition. 4 different ammo types that help in a variety of situations, and there's a plethora of diagrams and tables, analysis, which one is best used in which situations. I'm sure competitive gamers absolutely know which ammo is suited for which situation. I won't go into them all in detail, but to a large degree most people seem comfortable with the Hellfire rounds because they do wounds on 2+s on anything but vehicles and Titanics, which is really, really good. Now, with a few caveats on this, is that it does not work with Bolt or Discipline, and rightfully so in a way, because it does work with Combat Doctrines, which already is a great combination. 2+ to wound plus Combat Doctrines, that can be quite scary. If you added in Bolt or Discipline, I think it would have been a little bit too good, but I'm open to criticism on that if people think maybe not, but I think it might have been a bit too good. Now, one thing to mention then when I want to look at this rule and compare it to Chaos Space Marines. In the Chaos Space Marine review, I mentioned that Death to the False Emperor, which works for the Chaos Space Marines, is a sort of equivalent where you've got, they obviously have a rule that works solely for against Imperium units in combat. Fine. But it means a lot of games that rule is largely going to get ignored. It makes sense fluff-wise, in the lore, but as a game mechanic in games with different factions and combinations, it does not feel right to have Death to False Emperor just work in some games. Special issue ammunition shows a big difference here in mentality. It could have been dangerous that if they'd written it special issue ammunition was specific to hunting Xenos. For instance, maybe if they went for 1 ammo for Necrons, 1 for Tau, 1 for Elder, 1 for Tyrannids, etc, etc, 1 for Orcs, it would have not have felt so good, and generally would have made the games you played with Deathwatch a lot worse. However, having a rule that works in every game is interesting. I guess it's trying to balance the lore of a game, but with game mechanics, and having a gate, a universal rule for an army, I just don't agree with. That's what Death to the False Emperor is, or at least in 40k games. I'm glad they didn't go down the route of making them totally alien hunters, like, you know, the previous codexes like Chaos Space Marines were. It shows that it hurts the army as a whole playing that, and if you had it where these ammunitions just worked against Xenos, it would have been really, really painful. Then again, you know, special issue bolter fire, I suppose that a bolter round works just as well in a Heretic as it does a Xenos, you know, so that's one way to justify it. What I'm saying is I approve of the direction they went for this rather than what they did with Chaos, and in the Chaos one, you know, basically made it less dependent on your opponent, and it works in just about every game. In the Chaos one, I suggested that they should maybe drop Death to False Emperor and just make the benefits like marks, maybe like special issue ammunition, the marks play an equivalent in the game. What I'm saying is that, you know, it was great to see that they went, well, instead of it just making it totally Xenos Hunter, let's make sure it works in every game. So great success there. Oh, they can also combat squad. I'm not going to go into that as a rule, we all know it's fine. Their Legion rule is the mission tactics. Pretty simple one. Choose one of the sort of battlefield roles and you get to reroll wound rolls on them. Simple and effective. Alright, if you face an army that has loads of dedicated transports, yeah. But if an opponent's playing lots of dedicated transports, then, you know, your opponent's probably more trouble than you are. I also enjoyed the fact it was reroll wounds to roll of 1 to roll rather than +1 to wound, because, I mean, you've got the ammunition that's 2+ to wound, it would have been really negated. It's similar to like the Dominus and Admech, although they've got their Canticle that allows reroll 1s to hit in shooting. Dominuses offer that already. It seems a bit of an odd one. Why didn't they make Canticles just like +1 to hit in shooting rather than reroll 1s? That way you get a benefit from your Dominus. Small tweaks like that where they realised the error of early codexes when, oh, there's rules overlapping or there's rules not working out in the whole. I felt Deathwatch really did work out quite well there. They went, want to make sure the rules work for every army that they face, and it feels nice in the game mechanics. So I think Deathwatch really did work out quite well there. Warlord Traits, overall not too bad for Deathwatch. None are standout auto takes, and I find that good because if you have one that stands out, then it's just the rest of them are wasted space. The only two I would criticise heavily are the Watch Eternal, giving a 6+ ignore wound for models within 6 inches on the last wound. 6+ to ignore wounds is not great in general. Maybe make it 6+ at all times or 5+ on the last wound. Something that would have been more ideal. Vigilance Incarnate, nice to change your mission tactic easily, so you change your Legion rule from hunting troops to hunting HQs, that would be really nice. But I feel that if you take a Watchmaster as your HQ, you're better off just taking the Farm Command Point one, because you might get more points back, and then the stratagem that allows this change, simply you just use your refund as command points. If I was to change this one, I'd say that you'd be able to use it at the start of any of your turns, but only works on, say, a 4+, or maybe by battle round, so on a 6, on turn 2 it'd work on 6s, turn 3 on 5s, turn 4 on 4s, turn 5 on 3s, turn 6 on 2s, and turn 7 you can change it whatever you want. I just feel that the easy change, it's fine, but if you take a Watchmaster as your Warlord, it doesn't quite gel as well. Stratagems, Deathwatch have a total of 29 in their codex, and that's a heck of a lot. Then followed by 14 in White Dwarf, though I think one of them's been deleted in an FAQ. Focusing on the 29 in codex, because the White Dwarf ones are just like Space Marine ones that have been added in, similar to a lot of Psychic Awakenings, except like Blood Angels, Dark Angels got like an extra 3 or 5, where they're focused on like their Sanguinary Guard, etc., specific to units in them. Deathwatch didn't get that, which is a bit of a shame, but overall that was what the Psychic Awakening of those codexes, like Blood Angels, their Psychic Awakening, brought in loads of the standard Space Marine ones in there, because Space Marines added a whole bunch of stratagems. However, 5 of them Of these 29, 5 of them are specific to Xenos, and which is nice. An extra rule is nice, it makes sense lore-wise. Obviously, if you're playing Imperial or Chaos, they're largely ignored, and you're not going to really face any of those Xenoses mixing together. So that sort of rules out a few of them already. Then there's 6 that add 1 to wound rolls against a battlefield roll, and I feel this is messy but also good. Take into consideration, for instance, Vets of the Long War. Great Stratagem gives +1 to wound for 1 command point. However, as it's stratagem, it's only usable once in a phase. Deathwatch does have 6 variances, so you could essentially use 6 different +1s to wound in a single phase. However, that is 12 command points and a bit pricey. I suppose you're giving up the chance to use stratagem, you're giving up the chance for the stratagem being cheap like Vets, and only using it once, and you can use it a plethora of times, but it's a bit expensive maybe. It's a great stratagems, choices to choose from, great, but it's not going to be played all the time because it is so expensive. I always also like to do good and bad stratagems on the basis that the bad ones need to be replaced. If everyone says, look, these are just wasted, no one's using them, think of something else, just scrap them. The good ones, Decapitation Doctrine, an interesting one. If your enemy's Warlord is a big thing, like a Hive Tyrant or Knight or whatever, or in a bad position, then you get a bunch of reroll wound rolls on it. Really, really nice, works out well, makes sense. Teleportarium, giving units to access Deep Strike. I mean, they have drop pods, so you can Deep Strike a lot of units, but just being easy access to move units around in 8th edition, speed is really, really important. This one's actually quite nice, so I do like it, but we do have drop pods. Suppose it's cheaper, I guess. The bad ones, Etheric Channeling. This ain't a great one outside of Psyker heavy armies like Thousand Suns or Grey Knights. Those guys specialise in dealing damage with warp, let the Xenos Hunters do Xenos hunting thing. Maybe something to augment defense of warp creatures, like choose a Psyker in your army and at the start of the Psychic phase, an enemy Psyker who rolls a double in the Psychic phase suffers a peril of the warp. I think Adeptus Sororitas have that, and so something like that would be really, really good. Flak missiles. Now I'm going to sort of include flak missiles, Clavis and Tempest Shells. I hate these sort of roll a dice and you might cause D3 wounds. So you've got like roll a dice, you might miss, waste the command point. Roll a dice, get it, and you might only cause 1 mortal wound. With 1 command point, that just doesn't feel right. Flak missiles, I think they should maybe change to say, and I feel this for all of them, fired at a unit with fly, that unit until the end of your opponent's next turn, have -1 to it. That would be quite nice. Clavis, another one. I feel the Clavis, which is sort of hurts vehicles, I feel maybe it should disrupt the machine, maybe it gets -1 to hit in combat, which feels a bit weak. Maybe Deathwatch models that make an attack on it until the end of the fight phase do an extra damage on unmodified wound rolls of 6. That might be also useful. And the Bolter one, I really don't know. Maybe it's just fine as it is to try and sink off a few mortal wounds off a HQ that was already wounded. But I just feel Flak, Clavis and Tempest all need to be changed in some way. Deathwatch relics are rather limited here, only getting 6 to choose from, which seems weird for Deathwatch as a lot of their stuff is about their war gear. The White Dwarf entry would have been nice to expand on this, but it is what it is, we've got 6 to choose from. The good ones, the Beacon of Angelus, probably one of the best choices. Redeployment to units are always useful. Take a character, deep strike them in, then redeploy a unit. That's not bad. The bad ones though is the Bane Bolt of Erixia, essentially an upgrade to shooting capabilities rather than replace a weapon. I get it, but Deathwatch commanders are not really that good at ranged. I think if this was going to work, then you need a Deathwatch ranged character, like an assassin. That would be really cool, like a Deathwatch one that's a captain or some that's designed to take out Xenos HQ from ranged. Then yeah, this might be okay. But I also think that maybe make an aura ability where, Deathwatch around them, they cause an unmodified wound roll of 6 as an extra damage, similar to what I said for the Clavis. Maybe that doesn't make sense because this is like ammunitions for the guy. I just think it should be slightly better. The Dominus Aegis, which is Storm Shields, giving the user 3 up invul, but 5 up invul for all units around them. Keep in mind, most things in the army are like 3 up armor save, so 5 up invul only takes effect at -3 AP. It's not great. If they're in cover, it has to be -4 AP. I think it should be maybe, everyone within a 6-inch aura gets 5 up ignore wounds, would be much more ideal and play more into the game. Thief of Secrets, replace a power sword for bonus against Xenos. You choose a Xenos type, you get a bonus for it. The problem with Space Marines in general having upgraded weaponry for their stuff is that Thunderhammer is so good. They tried to reduce it by making it very expensive, but the Thunderhammer is really, really good in general, and I think anything with power sword has access to a Thunderhammer. So I sort of feel that the Thunderhammer always wins. I don't know how you make an answer for this one. It's just goes by weapon basis. Some are great and worthy of going ahead of the Thunderhammer. Some, like this one, I don't believe so. Psychic abilities, interesting one here. In the Space Marine retrospective said of this discipline, I love it, I thought it was pretty good. But the Deathwatch are actually still using the old version of it, where some abilities are not as good as others, and the warp charge, for instance, of Null Zone is higher in Deathwatch than it is Space Marines. I think this should have been addressed in the White Dwarf, but it's going to be addressed in some time when Deathwatch get a new codex. Don't know when that'll be, in the next year or two, but it just seems a little bit lazy. It would be nice to get that upgraded some of the Space Marines. Lieutenancies of Battle, again, taken straight from the Space Marine Codex. I get it. Grey Knights, they are the only ones I think that got their own individual lieutenancy table, while Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Dark Angels, I think they got one extra lieutenancy ability. So I sort of get that one. I can be a bit more forgiving. It would be nice to maybe have a Deathwatch specific lieutenancy, that would have been fine. But again, the White Dwarf was really just to bring Deathwatch more in line with the Space Marine Codex. The only thing that was missing there was sort of putting the White Dwarf. Summary of the part. Summary of these rules, I think the foundation of Deathwatch is actually really, really good. With the White Dwarf, it was just a simple case of clean up, add a nice stratagem, so that was good there. The army-wide rules for them are pretty darn good as well, and I feel good, and they feel good on the tabletop. Stratagems largely, the stratagems offer a large variety to choose from, which is good. The weakness I feel is in Relics, Warlord Traits, Psychic abilities, and Litanies. Psychic abilities and Litanies I think should be more varied. Some may argue that because Deathwatch are taken from various chapters, then that explains why their Psychic abilities and Litanies are so similar to Space Marines. But this game, we can imagine stuff. Maybe they've been serving with Deathwatch a few times and they've picked up a few tricks. Just having a different table like Grey Knights would have actually been really, really good and give them a bit of individuality. Warlord and Relics, well, both ain't too bad. I just believe, there is just a few too many bad options, and we should really raise them and hopefully communicate unless they get redone or taken out. That would be really, really good. I believe that should be done, with just about every codex, that you should give reviews on them, that they say, look, these aren't working. Because if these relics and warlord traits don't get reworked, they just pass on to the next codex that gets updated, and they're just wasted space. They're not ideal. They should always be going, these 2 or 3 are weaknesses, let's rethink about them. So as a foundation for Deathwatch, overall, I think it's actually pretty good. The weakness of Deathwatch are its roster, which we're coming into next. So sometimes this can be my longest section, where I go into detail into the roster, looking into the individual sections to choose from: special characters, HQ, elite, troop, fast, etc, etc, etc. However, when I do see some big flaws with Codex in terms of choices, I just try and speak about it generically. How I think Deathwatch was made was in development during a time where they were bringing out many codexes, and what I mean by that is like codexes with only a few choices in them, this being Harlequins, Scutari, Cult Mechanicus, Deathwatch, and Genestealer Cult. I think these were kind of tricky in a ways, and in some part limited the choices you had to feel, so didn't really feel that good on the game. There have been some good progresses in this though. Scutari and Cult Mechanicus being made into one codex was not bad, it was good, and then they added a whole bunch of units added in 8th, I think 11 choices to choose from, and they also added in like characters and stuff. So overall with Scutari and Cult Mechanicus, they did a fantastic job expanding on that. Genestealer Cult actually came out with a few good choices overall, so that's fine there. The two that got left a wee bit on the side were Harlequins and Deathwatch. Now Deathwatch for sure had some potential and getting stuff added, but I feel that it was just a little bit left behind. When we got the Shadow Spear box, which had Chaos and Phobos Armor Space Marines, we were originally going to paint those Phobos Armor in Deathwatch and start a small Deathwatch army. But when they said, oh, that can't be done, I couldn't understand why. Maybe there's a lore reason behind it, but it just seemed like Phobos armor seemed quite good for kill teams, because like maybe the armor, because kill team use their own specific armor, but the Phobos stuff, this infiltration, seems quite unique for a kill team. It might have been quite interesting to take. Either way, I just feel it's a bit negative, you know, and I want to say some positives quickly. Adding Watch Captain Artemis was awesome, you know, good throwback to the Inquisitor game. I remember when I was younger, that game was kicking about. I never played it, but you had like the models were like yay big. That's a terrible way to describe it, but they were cool. I remember, like, I think Inquisitor Eisenhorn was one, and then there was Watch Captain Artemis. That was really cool, so it's really nice to have that come in. The Watchmaster model I think is really cool. Some people might say it's boring, but I actually quite like it. I did notice that a general trend on this one, that was the sort of beginning of Space Marines. Their HQs were just getting like one loadout and that was it. I'm looking at the Gravis armor for that example, it only has one loadout, that's it. I don't really like that trend, but I do like the Watchmaster's model, so that's fair. But I like when HQs have more choices to them. Then you have the kill teams themselves of veterans and intercessors. They are really good, it allows you to customize the unit. I really like it. The veteran models I absolutely love. I actually bought a few of them when we were going to maybe look at expanding into Deathwatch army, and then we realised that maybe we should invest in other areas. They're really detailed, they're really cool. You can make each kill team feel individual. And then you've got the Corvus Blackstar, which is another unit I like. It's different rule, it feels very different to just about anything Space Marine wise. Feels more like a different faction, but I like it. I think it's quite good, and it shows Deathwatch are very unique in terms of the war gear that they actually have available to them. However, you know, the strength of Space Marines is their plethora of units, the things that they call to arms, and they can adapt to different situations. And I feel that Deathwatch has lost a little bit in this. I get that they don't use scouts, that makes sense, but eliminators, the Phobos armor ones, I just think make natural sense for Deathwatch. And maybe there's a lore thing again I'm missing, but it just seems a bit odd. In total for their section, I like the customization, it works well. You can almost make each individual kill teams, it's each individual goal. But I feel something is majorly missing here. I hope in the future Deathwatch get a few more options, add in the Phobos, but something a bit more individual to them, because the individual kill team veterans look awesome, but I would like another kit like that added for Deathwatch to make them feel individual from just generic Space Marines. I know that the Indomitus stuff adds a lot of potential for the future, because now Primaris seem to be focusing on close combat. And I feel that once we've completed this close combat Primaris, maybe add in a flyer or something like that, we should maybe move away from generic Primaris and focus on Deathwatch, Grey Knights, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, etc. They have all of them have got individual units that make them unique. Now, if people want to play predominantly Primaris army because they're either competitive or they are more interested in Primaris. I know that's an uncommon thing, but some people are more interested in Primaris. I would just like to see these armies, which are unique. They're very unique because the models are unique, the rules are unique, but they've got unique models. None of them have had them added other than HQ choices, Primaris HQs individually. I would like to see, you know, Blood Angels, Deathwatch, Grey Knights, some people might fight against that, get a Primaris option. Why? Because Primaris is the future. You're not really going to get old school Space Marines. I believe in total there's only been one old school Space Marine added since 8th edition, and that was a Terminator Librarian. That was like a special edition one. That's the only old one they've added. So the future is Primaris. You may not like it, but that is the way we're going with Space Marines. And so we've got to not forget about these codexes. The base level of Primaris is getting filled out of combat. I love it, it's great. But we've got to remember that Blood Angels have unique stuff. I don't count Death Company Intercessors. You know, we've got their individual units, Sanctuary Guard, their Death Company, I think it's called. You've got Space Wolves. Now, Wilfen wouldn't make any sense. But you've got Long Fangs. How that work Primaris, I don't know. Many people may not want that updated. Deathwatch, maybe they should have something a bit more individual Primaris unit. And then Grey Knights, now that's when I think David's not keen on them getting Primaris units, but it is the way forward. And I think that goes for just about all these armies, that they need to have these sort of Primaris new models equivalent for them. It's nice that they get, you know, Phobos armor, not in the case of Deathwatch and Grey Knights. It's nice they get these extra stuff, but now they're just beginning to feel a bit more like just another Imperial Fist, just another Raven Guard. No disrespect to them, but I just feel that these forces for years have had individual stuff, and I hope they do get them in the future, and that includes Deathwatch. So thanks again for watching, guys. Please comment, share, like and subscribe. I'm interested to hear what people think of Deathwatch. I loved the models when they came out. I thought the kill team was awesome, and I feel then 8th edition came out and they're largely left to the wayside. I'd like to see, especially, I don't play Space Marines very often. I play the Imperial Fist on occasion. I'm more of the heretic side, but I do recognise that there is a sense of individuality for these Marine codexes, and I feel there needs to be a bit more of a focus on them. I know it's an unpopular opinion, saying there needs to be more focus on Space Marines, but these individual ones have a reason why they feel individual, and I would just like a bit more of an update there. Some may disagree, some may agree. Let me know. Check out our social media where you can see our upcoming projects, bunch of stuff working on. I'm working on a whole bunch of AdMech to try and get ready for 8th edition. I don't know if I'll make it quite in time, but certainly for some of the later games, we will definitely get them in the go, which will be excellent, and then whatever armies add on next after that. And then also check us out on Patreon where you can help support the channel, bring you more content, because we absolutely love doing so. So thanks again, we'll see you on our Tabletop Assault Battle Report.